Right folks, gather round because we've got ourselves a real head-scratcher. A film you've probably never heard of unless you're a film critic with a penchant for the obscure, has just waltzed away with 13 Oscar nominations. That's more than films people actually went to see. It's like finding out your Nan's fruitcake won a Michelin star. You're happy for Nan, sure, but also a tad confused. So, how did manage this feat? Is it a cinematic masterpiece disguised as an art house oddity? Or is this a classic case of Oscar bait, designed to reel in those golden statuettes while leaving audiences utterly bewildered? Let's dive in, shall we? This isn't just about one film, folks. It's about the very soul of the Oscars. Are these awards still a barometer of cinematic excellence, or have they become a game of box ticking and highbrow obscurity? Stay tuned, because things are about to get interesting. Is, to put it mildly, a unique beast. It's a film that defies easy categorization, blending elements that you wouldn't typically expect to see together. Imagine, if you will, a cartel kingpin on the run who decides the best way to disappear is to undergo a sex change operation and become, you guessed it, Emilia Pérez. It's a premise that sounds like it was pulled straight out of a telenovela but with a twist. Now, throw in a hotshot lawyer who gets caught in the crossfire and sprinkle liberally with musical numbers that seem to erupt out of nowhere. It's a wild ride from start to finish. Now, I'm not averse to a bit of genre bending. In fact, when done right, it can be bloody brilliant. It can offer fresh perspectives and unexpected delights. But this film feels less like a cohesive vision and more like someone threw a crime drama, a telenovela, and a Broadway musical into a blender and hit puree. The result? A film that's as confusing as it is ambitious. It's a mix that leaves you scratching your head wondering what you just watched. Don't get me wrong, the premise itself is intriguing. It promises a lot of excitement and drama. There's potential for sharp social commentary, for exploring themes of identity and transformation. These are rich, compelling themes that could resonate deeply with audiences. But the execution, my friends, leaves a lot to be desired. It's like the filmmakers had too many ideas and not enough focus. It's like watching a talented chef try to make a souffle in a hurricane. The ingredients are there, but the conditions are far from ideal. There's a lot of frantic activity, but the end result is a bit of a mess. It's a film that aims high but ultimately falls short of its ambitious goals. Now let's talk about those musical numbers, shall we? You know, the ones that pop up out of nowhere and leave you scratching your head. Because, oh boy, are they something else. They can be so jarring that you almost feel like you've switched to a different movie entirely. One minute we're in the midst of a tense standoff between Emilia and her former cartel rivals, the air thick with suspense and danger. The next, everyone's bursting into song and dance like they're auditioning for a Broadway musical. It's as if the characters suddenly forgot they were in a crime drama. And it's not just the randomness of it all, it's the fact that these musical interludes rarely, if ever, serve the plot. They seem to exist in a vacuum, disconnected from the story. It's like the director got a bulk discount on show tunes and decided to shove them in wherever they'd fit. Narrative coherence be damned. It's almost as if they were trying to meet a musical quota. Look, I'm all for a good song and dance, but when they're shoehorned into a film with the grace of a drunken elephant, it's hard to take them seriously. It feels forced and out of place. It's a shame really, because the music itself isn't bad. In fact, some of the numbers are quite well composed and performed with great energy. Some of the tunes are actually quite catchy. They have the potential to be memorable if only they were used more thoughtfully. But they're deployed with such a lack of purpose, such a disregard for pacing and tone, that they end up detracting from the film rather than enhancing it. It's a missed opportunity. It's like putting ketchup on a perfectly good steak. Sure, you can do it, but it just doesn't make sense. You can do it, but why would you? It leaves the audience bewildered and questioning the creative choices made. One thing most critics seem to agree on is that Karla Sofía Gascón delivers a powerhouse performance as Emilia Pérez. And look, she's undeniably magnetic on screen. She brings a raw intensity and vulnerability to the role, making Emilia a captivating, if deeply flawed, character. But here's the thing. Is Gascon's performance truly Oscar-worthy? Or is it being elevated by the sheer audacity of the film itself? It's a valid question, isn't it? When a film is as unconventional, as daring, some might say messy as, it's easy for a strong performance to stand out even more. It's like finding a diamond in the rough. The diamond might be impressive on its own, but its context makes it seem even more valuable. I'm not saying Gascon doesn't deserve recognition. She carries the film on her capable shoulders. But it's worth asking whether her performance would be generating the same level of buzz if it were in a more conventional, less, "look at me, I'm being edgy" film. Section 5. Critics cornered. To praise or not to praise, that is the question. Now let's talk about the critics, shall we? Because their reactions to have been, to put it mildly, all over the shop. Some have hailed it as a masterpiece, a groundbreaking work of art that pushes boundaries and challenges conventions. Others have been less impressed, calling it disjointed, tonally uneven, and just plain confusing. So, who's right? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But here's what I find interesting. Even the positive reviews seem to come with a caveat. It's like the critics are praising the film with one hand while holding their noses with the other. You'll see phrases like, flawed but fascinating, or a noble failure thrown around. It's like they admire the film's ambition, its willingness to swing for the fences, but they can't quite bring themselves to fully embrace it. And who can blame them? When a film is this all over the place, it's hard to know what to make of it. Section 6. Where are all the viewers, eh? Here's another curious thing about. For a film with 13 Oscar nominations, it's had a remarkably low profile. It had a limited release, meaning it played in a handful of theaters, mostly in big cities, and then vanished quicker than a politician's promise. This begs the question, if it's so bloody brilliant, why haven't more people seen it? Now, I understand that not every Oscar-nominated film is going to be a box office smash. Sometimes the Academy likes to shine a light on smaller, more independent films that might otherwise fly under the radar. But takes this to a whole new level. It's like the Academy is awarding a prize for a painting that's been locked away in a vault, unseen by the public. It makes you wonder if the Oscars are more interested in rewarding films that fit a certain narrative, a certain idea of what's important or worthy, rather than films that actually connect with audiences. Section 7. Ticking the boxes, the art of making Oscar bait. Let's be honest, folks, there's something about that just screams Oscar bait. It's got all the right ingredients. It's an international film, it tackles LGBTQ+ themes, it's got those artsy musical numbers, and it's about as far removed from a superhero blockbuster as you can get. It's like the filmmakers sat down with a checklist of things that impress Oscar voters and said, right, let's make sure we tick every single box. And look, I'm not saying that a film can't be both entertaining and thought-provoking. Some of the greatest films ever made managed to do both, but feels less like a genuine attempt to tell a compelling story and more like a calculated exercise in award season strategizing. It's the cinematic equivalent of that kid in school who always did the bare minimum, but still managed to get good grades because they knew exactly what the teachers were looking for. It's frustrating, isn't it? Because it feels like the Oscars are rewarding mediocrity disguised as profundity. Section 8. Snubbed, the case of the missing nominations. Speaking of frustration, can we talk about the films and performances that got snubbed this year? It's a topic that never fails to ignite passionate debates among movie lovers and critics alike. Because while some films are busy racking up nominations, there are some genuinely deserving contenders who are being left out in the cold. It's a recurring issue that seems to plague the industry year after year. Take Margot Robbie, for example. Her performance in was nothing short of transformative. She brought depth, humor, and pathos to a role that could have easily been one-dimensional. Critics and audiences alike were blown away by her portrayal. And yet she's nowhere to be found in the Best Actress category. It's a glaring omission that has left many scratching their heads. And what about a film that's visually stunning, masterfully directed, and features a career-best performance from Michael Fassbender? The film has all the elements of a classic, yet it remains overlooked, completely ignored by the Academy. It's almost as if the film never existed in their eyes. It's almost as if the Oscars are so busy patting themselves on the back for recognizing a film as daring as that they've forgotten about actual cinematic achievements. The focus seems to be more on making a statement rather than celebrating true artistry. It's like going to a restaurant, ordering a perfectly cooked steak, and then watching the waiter give the Best Meal of the Year award to the table that ordered a plate of unseasoned tofu because it's more adventurous. The analogy might seem humorous, but it perfectly captures the frustration. It's enough to make you want to flip the table and storm out. The snubs are not just disappointing, they feel like a disservice to the art of filmmaking itself. Section 9. So, is any good, and does it even matter to the Oscars? So we've talked about the plot, the music, the performances, the critics, the lack of audience, and the snubs. Now, the big question, is any good? Honestly, it's hard to say. It's a film that's both intriguing and frustrating, ambitious and messy, thought-provoking and utterly baffling. It's the kind of film that's easier to admire than to love. But here's the thing. Does it even matter if is any good? Because the Oscars, for all their supposed prestige, seem to have lost sight of what truly matters, celebrating the best in filmmaking. Instead, they've become a self-congratulatory circle jerk, rewarding films that are deemed important or worthy, rather than films that actually resonate with audiences. And that, my friends, is a damn shame. Because when we reduce art to a checklist of criteria, when we prioritize message over execution, we lose sight of the magic of cinema, we lose sight of the power of storytelling, and that's a loss we can't afford.